Hello. So today's video is all about paper, and it is a little bit of a retrospective as well. I have now been painting for about 18 to 20 months, and in that time period I have played around with quite a few different types of watercolor paper. Note that this video is not a review but just a look back. My style and preference over that time period has evolved quite a bit. Also, please don't judge me for my older paintings from 2021. I think I've come a long way from since then. Alright, let's get started. So this is the first one. This was the first watercolor paper I started using way back 18-20 months ago. This is a Brustro cold press paper, 300 GSM, 25% cotton. It's an Indian paper, Indian brand. You get what you pay for with this paper. 25% cotton means you don't have all that great handling when it comes to laying your color on paper. Decent texture, nice little bit of granulation. I wouldn't use this as my regular paper, but it's fine for practice pieces. Next one is also by Brustro. This one was bought at the same time as the last one. But this is 100% cotton, and it has a rough texture. Decent paper, cheaper than the Western brands, and you get what you pay for. I personally don't like this texture. It's rough, but it's not the type of rough I enjoy. As with most 100% cotton papers, you get nice control of the paint, and the paint stays wet for a decent amount of time, so you can work wet in bed. Third one, which was brought at the same time as those other two. This is by Anupam, 300 GSM, cold press and no cotton. And I would avoid this. I don't like the texture. I don't like the way the paper handles paint. Lots of blooms, difficult to get flat washes. So as a beginner, this was a bad choice. I mean, it discouraged me from continuing with watercolor. I can handle it now because I know the medium, but don't go for any paper which is not 100% cotton. So I would avoid this. Next one is a cheap handmade paper, 180 GSM, 100% cotton. It was brought from a local stationery store called Virat Paper Mart in Bandra, Bombay. This texture is called matte texture, and I don't fancy it too much, but it's quite popular. And this paper handles watercolor quite well. Stays wet for a good amount of time, as handmade papers always do. And when you add paint to that wet wash, right, it flows out in a very fun manner. Lots of spread. So yeah, good paper to start off with if you fancy this matte texture. I avoided it because I don't like the texture, but I like the paper. This one was another local handmade paper that I got from the same place, same shop. This one was sold in sheets. The previous one came in a gummed pad. And this one is a deckled edge paper. 300 GSM, 100% cotton. Okay, I'm not very sure it's 300 GSM, but it's 100% cotton. Very rough. I had a very hard time managing this texture back then. But in hindsight, I would use it again. It was a lot of fun. Now that I know how to control the medium, I would definitely buy this paper again. It's a classic Indian handmade paper. So this one is a paper I used a lot in my first year of watercolor. This is a Bauhong cold press paper, academy grade, which is their student grade version. But surprisingly, for a student grade version, it is 100% cotton and 300 GSM, which is just brilliant. Little bit more affordable than their professional grade paper and excellent to start off with and then move to the professional grade. As with most cold press papers, tiny bit of texture, different texture on the back and the front. You can use both sides. Stays wet for a decent amount of time, not as much as the handmade paper, but still enough for you to get fun wet and wet effects. Highly recommended for anyone starting off right now. Next one is by an Indian brand called Chitrapat. This one too I would recommend quite highly for anyone starting off. 100% cotton paper, I think this is 270 GSM. This texture is called a rough texture. I got this in a block. There's a difference between the texture on the front and on the back. Unlike the last one, the back texture here is quite horrible. I don't like it. Front texture is a lot of fun to work with and stays wet longer than a machine-made paper.
This paper is relatively inexpensive and easily available in most corners of the country. Overall, just good value for money. Kindly allow me a few seconds to talk about my offerings on Skillshare. If you like my work and want to learn how to paint like me, you can find a link in the description section below. Not only will you get access to my classes on Skillshare, but you can also get 1 month free on the platform. Alright, now back into the video. This next paper is rather interesting.
So I brought it online from a store in Calcutta called Stationery, I think it's called. It's a rough paper, handmade, 300 GSM, 100% cotton. So not all handmade papers are the same. In India, each region has a different type of handmade paper. I think it depends on the cotton they use. And this one is very typical. This texture is very typical of what you see in Bengal. I've seen a lot of old Bengali artists use this sort of paper. And it's difficult to handle this texture. It's difficult to handle this paper. It takes some getting used to. Also, there's a layer of gelatin or something which requires you to wet the paper first before you actually lay the paint. I think you can wet it, let it dry, and then apply the paint and it's fine. But if you directly start with paint, it gives some funny issues. A lot of fun texture pops up, especially if you're using granulating colors. It stays wet for a long time. You might have difficulty using pencil on this, but if you're using direct watercolor, a lot of fun. So not for someone starting off, not for a beginner, but if you want to have some fun, give this a try. Good fun for an experiment or two. This is my favorite. This is the paper I am using as my go-to paper today, and will probably use it as my go-to paper for the foreseeable future. So this is a Bauhong cold press, professional quality, 100% cotton, 300 GSM. Has a nice little bit of texture, different in the front and the back. You can use either sides. It's different compared to the student grade. It's got more tooth compared to the student grade. And it works like the student grade. It does everything I said the student grade does, but it does all those things better. Amazing, amazing paper. Highly, highly recommended. Like most of my paintings that you will see on my Instagram page will be done on this paper. So this is what is this? Saunders Waterford. Saunders Waterford rough paper. 300 GSM, 100% cotton. This was quite an expensive sheet of paper, and I only picked it up because it was at an amazing price on a New Year's sale, if I'm not mistaken. It's a rough paper, but surprisingly, it's not all that rough. I mean, I would say this texture is equally rough to the cold press Bauhong, which I showed you earlier. It has this grid type pattern. It's different in the front and the back. I had purchased it in a block, a big 16 by 12 block. I don't know, I mean, it was fun, but not as much fun as my Bauhong. It doesn't stay wet as long. The way it acts wet and wet is a little different. When the paper is semi-dry, sometimes you get these funny flows happening. It takes some getting used to. My landscapes on this weren't all that great, but I got some nice animals in the last few sheets of the pad. If I get it cheap, I would use it again, but for the price it is, for the MRP, I can't justify paying that price for paper, at least at the moment, or at least for this particular paper. It doesn't suit my style, but it might suit yours, so you can give it a try. I won't say avoid it, give it a try. This one is a paper that I have only recently purchased, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So it's a brand called Khadi paper, which has a surprising story. It's made right here in India, in Karnataka, but they make most of their money by exporting this paper. So even in India, it is a little bit more expensive than the no-name handmade papers. Is the price justified? You be the judge. I mean, it's not all that expensive, and it's a really nice paper. 100% cotton, 320 GSM, lots of flow, stays wet for a long time. I like it. It's nice. I mean, I would go as far as to recommend it, but at the same time note that you can get a handmade paper for a cheaper price, especially if you are in India. I got this free with one of my purchases from some online stationery shop. Stonehenge Aqua Cold Press. I think it's 300 GSM, 100% cotton. Machine made cold press paper. I'm not very sure where this brand is from. So I use this little booklet for swatches. Decent, does what any cold press paper would do. Not as textured as the Bauhong, not as nice as the Bauhong. So I opted not to use this again. Also quite expensive. So not recommended from my side. And thus concludes our paper retrospective. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you found some nugget of information relevant to your watercolor journey. If any of these are your favorite, let me know. If there is a paper among these that you would like me to do an in-depth review of, leave it in the comment. do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.